One evening, when their parents were out, Marcus found her alone in her room again. This time his smile was gone. His face was dark, his eyes cold. He closed the door behind him with an almost casual motion. "Sarah," he said, his voice low, "we need to talk." She could feel the weight of his presence in the room, suffocating her. Her breath came in short, shallow bursts. She backed away, but he followed her, blocking the exit. "If you tell anyone what's happening," Marcus warned, his voice low and dangerous, "no one will believe you. I'll make sure of it. I'll ruin everything for you." Always been an ordinary high school girl, the type who got good grades, kept a low profile, and had a small circle of friends she trusted. She wasn't one to stand out, and that was just how she liked it. Her world was books, her refuge from the loud, chaotic reality of high school life. The quiet corner of her bedroom was where she could escape into the worlds of fantasy, mystery, and adventure, far away from the noise that sometimes overwhelmed her. Her dreams, like many teenagers, were full of possibilities. She wanted to become a writer, someone whose words could move others, someone who could share her stories with the world. Sarah wasn't just a student. She was a storyteller, a dreamer with aspirations beyond the confines of her small town. But that was before everything changed. Everything started unraveling on that cold autumn evening when her stepbrother, Marcus, came back home from college. Marcus had always been the golden child in the family. Handsome, charming, and effortlessly popular, he was everything Sarah wasn't. The way people gravitated toward him made her feel invisible in comparison. She had always admired him from afar, never truly understanding the power he had over everyone around him. He was a social magnet, and he seemed to have everything a person could want: looks, status, confidence. When Marcus returned home from college for the holidays, he was greeted with open arms. Sarah's parents, always proud of their son's success, couldn't stop talking about how well he was doing. It should have been a joyful time for Sarah's family, but something about Marcus felt different. His presence was unsettling, though Sarah couldn't pinpoint exactly why. It started small at first. Lingering glances, strange comments, and moments where Marcus would casually touch her arm or stand a little too close. She brushed it off, telling herself she was being paranoid. He was just being friendly, she thought. But soon, the harmless gestures turned into something more sinister. One night, Sarah was alone in her room, reading, when Marcus came in. His usual charm was gone, replaced by something colder, something darker. His smile didn't reach his eyes. He stepped closer to her, the air thick with tension. "Sarah," he said, his voice soft and almost sweet, but there was something threatening in his tone. "You know, you're really something. I've always noticed you. You're different from the others." Her heart started to pound in her chest. She tried to back away, but her feet felt glued to the floor. Something in his eyes made her stomach churn. "What do you mean?" she asked, though she knew the answer before he spoke. He didn't answer her directly. Instead, he stepped closer, his breath warm against her skin. "Don't make me regret this," he whispered. Sarah froze. The words didn't make sense, but they terrified her. She could feel the weight of his gaze, the intensity of his presence in the room. She wanted to scream, to run, but her body refused to obey. She couldn't escape. The fear that gripped her heart was paralyzing, and Marcus knew it. He took a step back, but the damage was done. He had marked her, made her feel smaller, less safe in her own home. From that night on, Sarah's life changed. Her once peaceful home became a place of constant dread. Marcus's behavior grew more erratic, more aggressive. He would corner her in the kitchen, brush against her in the hallway, and invade her personal space in ways that left her feeling dirty, trapped. His gaze would follow her everywhere, always lingering a little too long. Sarah withdrew into herself, trying to avoid him at all costs. She stopped spending time with her friends, stopped participating in school events, and started skipping meals. She wanted to disappear. She wanted to be invisible. But then things took an even darker turn. One evening, when their parents were out, Marcus found her alone in her room again. This time his smile was gone. His face was dark, his eyes cold. He closed the door behind him with an almost casual motion. "Sarah," he said, his voice low, "we need to talk." She could feel the weight of his presence in the room, suffocating her. Her breath came in short, shallow bursts. She backed away, but he followed her, blocking the exit. "If you tell anyone what's happening," Marcus warned, his voice low and dangerous, "no one will believe you. I'll make sure of it. I'll ruin everything for you." Sarah's world shattered in that moment. Her worst fear was no longer just a feeling, it was a reality. She couldn't tell anyone. Marcus had made it clear that he would destroy her if she did. He would make sure she was the one who was blamed. So, she stayed silent. She stayed trapped in her own home, unable to speak out, unable to escape. And the isolation only made things worse. She stopped seeing her friends, withdrew from school, and became a shell of the person she had once been. Sarah panic coursed through her veins as she realized the horrible truth. She was pregnant. The father was Marcus. She bought a pregnancy test in secret, locking herself in the bathroom. The result confirmed her worst fear. Sarah sank to the floor, overwhelmed by a sense of helplessness. The walls seemed to close in around her. She didn't know what to do. She couldn't tell anyone. She couldn't go to the authorities. Marcus's threats still loomed over her, and the fear of what he would do if she spoke out paralyzed her. She wore oversized clothing to hide her growing belly, hoping no one would notice. But it wasn't just her body that was changing, it was her mind, her soul. The stress, the constant fear, the sense of powerlessness wore her down until she felt like a hollow shell. One night, the pain came. It started as a dull ache, but soon, it became unbearable. Alone in the bathroom, Sarah had a miscarriage. She cried silently, alone with her grief, her loss, and her fear. She tried to convince herself that it was over, that the nightmare had ended, but it hadn't. A few months later, Marcus assaulted her again. This time, it broke her. Sarah couldn't eat. She couldn't sleep. She couldn't function. The girl who once had dreams, who once had hope, was gone. All that was left was a broken, frightened version of herself. Her best friend, Lily, noticed the change. Lily had always been Sarah's closest friend, someone who had known her since they were kids. They had shared everything, from their hopes for the future to their deepest fears. But lately, Sarah had been shutting her out. Lily didn't know exactly what was wrong, but she could see the change in Sarah. The spark that had once lit up Sarah's eyes was gone, replaced by a dull, empty stare. She flinched when Marcus came near her, and she was always so tired, always so sad. One day, when Sarah was too sick to go to school, Lily decided to visit. She brought snacks, trying to cheer her up, but when she entered Sarah's room, she found something that changed everything. Under Sarah's mattress was a small, worn notebook, Sarah's diary. Lily hesitated for a moment, but then opened it. What she read made her stomach turn. The words were chilling. Sarah's detailed accounts of Marcus's abuse, the threats, and the overwhelming fear that had consumed her life. Each page was a silent cry for help, a plea for someone to notice, to care. When Sarah came into the room and saw Lily holding the diary, her face fell. Tears welled up in her eyes as Lily pulled her into an embrace. "Why didn't you tell me?" Lily whispered, her voice filled with sorrow. "I couldn't," Sarah said, her voice barely audible. "He said he'd hurt me, or worse." Lily's heart broke for her friend, but she knew what had to be done. She convinced Sarah to call the police. But as they whispered together, they didn't realize Marcus had overheard everything. He stood in the doorway, his eyes cold and filled with rage. "You should have stayed quiet," he said, his voice calm but threatening. But this time, Sarah wasn't alone. Lily had already called the police. They arrived just in time, rushing in to arrest Marcus before he could do anything worse. The evidence Sarah had written in her diary was crucial in building the case against him. The trial was grueling, and for Sarah, it was an emotional roller coaster. Reliving the abuse in court was painful, but she found strength in Lily's unwavering support. Marcus's charming facade crumbled as the truth came out. He was sentenced to prison, where he could no longer hurt anyone. Sarah's journey to healing was slow and painful. The scars of her past would always be there, but with Lily by her side, she began to rebuild her life. She started therapy, and over time, she found the courage to speak out about her experience. She became an advocate for survivors of abuse, using her voice to help others who were suffering in silence. Though she would never forget the pain she endured, Sarah had reclaimed her life. She had survived, and she had become stronger because of it. And through it all, she knew that without Lily, her best friend, her savior, none of this would have been possible. Sarah's story became one of resilience and hope, a testament to the power of friendship and the strength that lies in speaking out, no matter how dark the path may seem. And though the darkness of her past would never completely fade, Sarah knew that, in the end, she had found her way back to the light.